All right, let's jump right into this explainer and completely transport ourselves back to a totally different era. I'm talking about the gritty, mud-splattered streets of 1888 Wall Street. We're going to witness the origin story of a true financial legend, Richard D. Wyckoff. Now, you probably know Wyckoff today as an absolute titan of technical analysis, but, he didn't just magically start at the top. So we're going to dig into the fascinating source material from his own memoirs, Wall Street Ventures and Adventures Through 40 Years, and see exactly how this whole incredible journey kicked off.
The source material actually opens by setting this incredibly vivid scene in its foreword. Picture this, a weary 15-year-old kid sitting up late into the night in this dimly lit room. His head is bowed, and he's just furiously filling page after page with endless computations. He pushes them away, only to sit back and stare at the bare walls. This kid was absolutely obsessed with the stock exchange, the railroads, and those legendary market operators of the day. And this driving question? It was actually pretty simple. Could he solve the riddle of the stock market? That was the problem. I mean, he figured if other guys had cracked the code to their success, well, why couldn't he? It is such a powerful hook, right? It totally sets the stage for a lifetime of relentless study.
And honestly, what a lifetime it was. That late-night obsession, it sparked a staggering 40-year career. The text outlines this massive, sweeping journey, starting with his very first job in 1888, navigating right through the devastating panic and depression of 1893, surviving the huge money panic of 1907, and finally closing his account and stepping away in 1928. It's literally a sweeping history of American finance. But to really understand the man behind the legend, we need to zoom all the way back to the chaotic streets of New York for his very first gig.
Wyckoff had this really funny but incredibly practical take on how he got into finance. He actually wrote, "It is rather a good idea to start Wall Street operations in short pants, as I did. You are not risking losing so much as the other fellows." I love that. At just 15, he had actually quit a law office job that paid $3 a week, all because his cousin was making $4. Talk about competitive spirit, right? Driven by that, he hustled hard for an opening that would pay $4 or more and managed to land a job right in the beating heart of the financial district.
So he gets hired by the brokerage firm of Hazard and Parker, and he was promised $20 a month. But when his first week ended, no paycheck. So gathering up his courage on a Monday morning, he asks his boss, Mr. Parker, if they paid by the week or the month. His boss just casually replies, "You can have it any way you like," pulls out a pencil, and meticulously calculates that $20 a month equaled exactly $4.61 for 26 weeks of the year, and $4.62 for the other 26. And young Wyckoff, he was just absolutely thrilled that he was officially beating his cousin's $4 salary.
But let me tell you, earning that $4.61 was no walk in the park. The daily grind for an analog runner was just brutal. Back in 1888, the whole machinery of Wall Street was incredibly physical. Wyckoff, alongside this giant guy named McNeil who was built like a cop, would literally trudge through pouring rain. They were hand-delivering physical stock papers through these tiny little wickets and collecting massive paper checks, sometimes up to a staggering $100,000. Then they'd take them to these fiercely eyebrowed bank tellers just to get them certified. They were literally sprinting through the streets until, as Wyckoff put it, they looked like a pair of well-swum muskrats. Plus, they had to memorize this complex, crazy maze of street shortcuts and office floors just to survive the day.
To really grasp the vibe of the era, you have to picture the heavy, imposing architecture of the time, like the 1863 Gold Exchange, right next to the stock exchange. It completely grounds us in the physical reality of early Wall Street. It was low-tech, it was made of heavy stone, and these were the exact same streets and hollowed-out steps that young Wyckoff was running up and down every single day.
And to further understand that environment, we have to look at the cityscape itself. Wyckoff points out that anyone who only knows modern Wall Street has absolutely no idea how different it used to be. The typical buildings back then were what he bluntly called rat traps, these dingy 3- or 4-story structures made out of brick, brownstone, or just wood, where the runners would clatter up worn wooden steps. And the wild part? This was starkly contrasted by what they considered architectural wonders at the time. I'm talking about towering skyscrapers, which, back then, were exactly 11 to 13 stories high. Places like the Mills and Equitable buildings. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
So what was it actually like inside his office at the Mills building? Well, the firm of Hazard and Parker was incredibly modest. Visitors would step into this tiny 3x6 vestibule, walled off by low walnut partitions. Inside, there was a high desk, a tall safe, and literally just a single stock ticker sitting between the windows. But my absolute favorite detail that Wyckoff shares is the seating. They had 2 rocking chairs, like exactly the kind you'd expect to see on a summer porch. His boss, Mr. Parker, would sit in one of these high-backed rockers, and he'd just oscillate violently back and forth when the market was moving. And when things were dull, he'd kick his feet up on the wastebasket and casually sing Little Annie Rooney.
Now, a really crucial part of understanding this era is looking at the kind of archaic, manipulative mechanics happening right in front of him. For example, one specialty of Wyckoff's firm was washing a stock called Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh. Basically, this meant repeatedly buying and selling the exact same inactive stock between allied firms just to prop up its quoted value. They'd sell 100 shares to a buddy's firm, and that firm would just turn around and sell them back a day or two later. It created this total illusion of transactions for an inactive stock, which they called a pup, just so it would show a quoted value every Tuesday and Thursday. Why go to all that trouble? Because someone needed that stock to look valuable on paper so they could use it as collateral with the banks. Crazy, right?
Wyckoff shares a hilarious anecdote about this exact practice. Because they were just trading the identical shares back and forth to wash the price, the exact same physical piece of paper, he thinks it was stock certificate number 13 or 23, just monotonously bobbed in and out of the office all week. And every single time it traded, a physical sales ticket was pinned right to it. Eventually, there were so many pin punctures in this poor old piece of paper that it literally looked like it had been blasted with birdshot. But hey, the wealthy operators running these wash sales, they seemed perfectly satisfied with it.
Beyond the crazy mechanics, the trading floor was just packed with this wild cast of characters. It really proves that while the technology changes, human psychology definitely does not. You had Mr. G, wearing this shabby greening derby hat, whose mouth would literally water as he grubbed around for pennies to buy high-grade bonds. Then there was Albert G. Jennings, this venerable lace manufacturer who bought absolute rafts of bonds but totally left the risky speculation stuff to his son. You had Paolo Lavilla, a total fanatic for railroad statistics who actually lost a dinner to young Wyckoff by betting on the wrong dividend rate. And oh man, Mr. Crittenden, a heavily bearded guy who managed to turn a $300 investment into $250,000. But get this, he flat out refused to take the profit because he stubbornly held out for a cool million.
But you know, this world wasn't just filled with quirky eccentrics. By 1889, it proved to be incredibly physically dangerous. The memoirs reveal that the old Wall Street wasn't just a place of quiet rocking chairs and paper tickets. It could explode, literally, into sudden violence.
Wyckoff recounts this shocking, truly visceral story involving the famous financier Russell Sage. So an anarchist named Norcross walks right into Sage's office carrying a satchel. And inside that satchel, a dynamite bomb. He demands $1 million on the spot under threat of immediate destruction. Wyckoff vividly recalls what happened next, writing, "Not getting it, he dropped the bomb which blew his own head off and knocked Uncle Russell into a corner." I mean, wow. Hearing the massive explosion, young Wyckoff literally sprints around the corner just in time to see people carrying the aged, wounded financier across Broadway to a drugstore. It was a chaotic, incredibly high-stakes world where life and fortunes could literally turn on a dime.
So we've seen the mud-splattered runners, those 3-story rat traps, the pincushion stock certificates, and the completely wild eccentrics of the 1880s. Now sure, the physical buildings and those massive paper checks, they're long gone. We've replaced them with fiber optic cables and digital algorithms. But if you look closely at the greed, the stubbornness, the blatant manipulation, and that intense, driving desire to uncover the secrets of the great operators, has the underlying riddle of the stock market truly changed since young Richard D. Wyckoff sat in that dim room back in 1888? It's a fascinating thing to think about, and honestly, it's what makes diving into his 40-year adventure absolutely essential.